Good afternoon, and welcome to the WBC Faster Together LinkedIn Live series. We are thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Rohini Anand to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Women Business Collaborative is an unprecedented alliance of over 50 women's business organizations collaborating together to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all business women. We are an alliance of 55 partner organizations and 350 champion professional men and women, business organizations, public and private companies, and the media, accelerating change through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability. So to propel women forward, we have aligned our champions and our partner organization against 9 essential action initiatives where we think we can drive change faster together. The first 3 of these initiatives focus on executive women's leadership in business. They are CEO leadership and sponsorship of women CEOs, women in the C-suite and executive leadership with P&L responsibility, and women in the boardroom. Our next 3 action initiatives focus on the underrepresentation of women in business. These are women entrepreneurs and access to capital, women in capital and finance, and women in technology. And our final 3 action initiatives are critical to everything we do for equity for women in business. And these are diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender and pay parity, and women in the pipeline. As you can see, our work focuses on ensuring more women CEOs in the C-suite and on boards, a demand for gender and pay parity, increasing access to institutional capital and capital for women entrepreneurs, driving more women as controllers of capital allocation, parity for women in business sectors such as technology, healthcare, and leveraging learning and development to drive pipeline promotions. And interwoven across every initiative and action we do is our call for inclusivity, diversity, and equality for all women, including women of color, the LGBTQIA community, and other disenfranchised women. Our movement and our network is spearheaded by our board, partners, advisory, and leadership champions, and it reaches millions of business leaders across the United States and the globe. We are committed to diversity, and our council's board of directors and partners include more than 30% people of color. It is this power of combining the collaborative approach with our women's business movement that's already creating momentum and accelerating the pace of change for business women. We want you to hear more about what we do, who we are, and where we're going. So we have our annual summit this September. It is entitled Empowering Through Gender, Equity, and Diversity. This summit takes place September 21st and 22nd, and we will recognize 2 key groups, 8 CEOs of some of the largest companies in the Fortune and Russell indexes who are leading the charge to advance diversity. These include BlackRock, State Street, Dow, Progressive, Walmart, Siemens, Procter & Gamble, and General Motors. We are also honoring 6 trailblazers whose leadership and innovation have created new pathways to change for their communities and beyond. This includes the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, the Sandra Brown Duckett, the CEO of TIAA, Magic Johnson, the CEO of Magic Johnson Enterprises, Indra Noy, former CEO of PepsiCo, Lily Ledbetter, activist and author, and Joey Ryman, the founder and CEO of Brand New World Studios. In addition, we have more than 17 panels with 67 key WBC partners, champions, and sponsors across industries and sectors, each of them talking about how to best create equal position, pay, and power for all businesswomen. This includes topics ranging from DE&I to how to build leadership across technology and healthcare industries to building the movement. Today, I am honored and thrilled to speak with Rohini Anand, DE&I advisor, author of the upcoming book, Leading Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which will be launching in the fall, former CDO and Senior Vice President of Corporate Responsibility at Sodexo, and Chair of the WBC DE&I Action Initiative. Welcome, Rohini.
Thank you, Gwen.
We're thrilled to have you here. So I want to start off with a bit of why you are part of the WBC and what you're doing with the WBC. Where do you see the power and why are you here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gwen. I think you summarized it so well in your introduction. And the reason I say that is because I think that the WBC is the only alliance that I know of that brings together these 50 organizations working for the same cause. The same causes being advancing executive women, advancing women's success in business, equity for women. And typically, in this space, the organizations around gender have sort of competed for resources, and the landscape can get pretty confusing. And to me, WBC is this one-stop shop. We're collaborating for the same cause, and we're lifting each other up. We're not competing. We're lifting the other women up. We're lifting the organizations up, and it sort of reminds me of what's attributed as an African proverb, which says, "To go fast, you go alone, and to go together, to go far, you go together." So to go fast, you go alone. To go far, you go together. And this is about going together and going far. And also, so I think that the alliance, the collaboration is very appealing to me, because that's how you get things done. And the second piece is this amazing network of women. I mean, you rattled off some incredible women that are going to be recognized. And so to me, this is an opportunity to meet some amazing women who are doing impressive, important work, whether they're heads of nonprofit organizations or have their own businesses, and that's really attractive. And then I think the third piece for me is the fact that WBC is going to be going global. And that is very, very attractive. I think there's an opportunity. There's this, blue ocean, white space, if you will, where I think WBC can really, make a mark. So to me, the collaboration, the fact that this is an alliance of powerful women, powerful organizations working for the same cause, and, kind of helping us navigate a fairly cluttered landscape, but everyone working in the same direction is terrific. So thanks for that question, Gwen.
I love that. And I love the global nature, because I know that's where you and I both come from, and the ability to work on leadership across cultures and companies and oceans. So I love that. That's fantastic.
That's going to be interesting to see how it's different as we translate it to different parts of the world. I know that we're starting the work in Europe, and it's very different not only in Europe, but each of the countries. So it's going to be interesting to see how we sort of navigate that space. And I think we have some incredible women leaders who are helping us do that. So
I know, I think it's going to be incredibly exciting. And as we do that, we're talking a bit about what the targets look like, it's typical for people to compare countries. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, some of our targets. We're at a position now where we're about 8% of CEOs are women. We have a target of 25% of CEOs being women of color, and another sort of 10% of the C-suite being women of color. I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of the key targets and kind of where we are and how important it is to measure.
Yeah, so I think what is very appealing to me about WBC, as you said in the introduction, is this sort of intersectional lens that we take to all the work that we do across all of the 9 action initiatives. So, the targets are, lofty, but they're attainable if we all work together. So I love the fact that we have a target not just for women, but we've actually identified a target for women of color. So 10% women in the C-suite will be women of color by 2030, right? 25% of the women CEOs, the target that we have for women CEOs will be women of color by 2030. And 25% of the Russell 3000 women board members will be women of color by 2030. So impressive, lot of work to be done. But I think what's important is also to understand where we are today. And where we are today is, as of June, I think it was June 2021, 8.6% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are women, and just 1.2% are women of color. So there's an incredible amount of work to be done. When we look at pay equity, women earn 81 cents to a dollar earned by men. Women of color earn 75 cents to a dollar. And within that, each of the individual racial ethnic groups of women of color have sort of different earning capacities, or what they earn is varies. So while there's progress, particularly in the boardroom, there's a lot more work to be done. And I think it's really critical that we don't just have sort of these targets for women, but we also have targets for women of color. I think that's incredibly important because the experiences are very different. So I'll just leave it at that.
That leads actually really interestingly into sort of a fact and then a question about the intersectionality. As you said, we do a monthly report. So women of color comprise about a third of the female board appointments every month. But leading the way in that group are African American or Black women who
Sure.
self-identify, right? Hispanic women falling way far behind. So
Right.
it's interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the intersectionality of DEI and how we're looking, how we're getting smarter, and how we're talking about women of color.
Yeah, so I think, the issue here is that women have some common experiences. There are common experiences, across all racial groups. As women, we have some common experiences. But I think there are also differences in terms of experiences of women of color. And while we have to be allies to each other as women, we have to lift each other up as women. I do think we need to understand and parse our data because these experiences do vary. I mean, you just mentioned a couple of those differences. So I can add a couple more. So for instance, Asian women are least likely to be promoted from individual contributor to management level. And Ascend, which is a nonprofit, which is a partner organization of WBC, has done this incredible piece of research on the model minority myth for Asians. And this tends to be a double-edged sword, which pits one group against the other. And, Asian women tend to be left out of the DEI dialogue. So that, the experience is very different. If you look at Hispanic women, you just mentioned, Hispanic women have the lowest percentage of all women of color on boards. And yet they're some of the most ambitious women who aspire to senior level positions. When you look at Black women, they have a very heavy emotional tax to pay. They're double outsiders, there's double burden. They're impacted by COVID, impacted by racial inequities. And, and so their experiences are very different. So, and, Black and Hispanic women are the most likely to experience micro inequities, and yet they aspire to senior level positions at twice the rate of white women. So yes, there are experiences we all share as women, but there are also different experiences based on what the ethnicity is, what your race is. So that is part of the intersectional dialogue that we need to bring to both target setting, but also how organizations look at data. Because the solutions vary and organizations need to parse that data and to understand what the barriers are in order to put in place initiatives that advance different groups of women of color based on what those barriers are. So I think there's a collective experience, but I think there are those individual experiences based on our intersectional identities. I'm a woman, I'm an Asian American, and both of these have an influence on my how I experience the workplace. So
absolutely. And I think that's important. Like you said, there's the dialogue piece and there's the collective, and then there's really understanding it with the perspective of each. Talk about that a lot in terms of allyship. What does diversity, equity, inclusion look like in 2021, right? Post-COVID, at least in the United States, but beyond these sort of calls for social justice, racial justice, what is it? How is 2021 different, or is it, than the calls for diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so I think 2021 is different. I think we need to sort of unfreeze our mental models, unfreeze how we're approaching diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to accelerate, and clearly the time is now. There is this, need for an urgency around racial justice, urgency around, gender equality. And I think the events of this year and last year have really propelled it forward. Now, the World Economic Forum says that it's going to be 135 years before women get parity, which is, obviously completely unacceptable. So there is a sense of urgency. I think, there's an incomplete sort of racial justice, gender equity landscape around us that is driving us forward. And, I think that organizations have pivoted in a way that we never thought was imaginable during COVID, right? So organizations went to flexible work, remote work overnight. And we just, in industries that was just unthinkable, right? Without any training, without any preparation, they did that. McKinsey has this report where they talk about, certain companies, and one of the companies they talk about is Best Buy, and how Best Buy was sort of trying this curbside pickup for 2 years. And then what happened? Within 24 hours, everyone went to curbside, right? So, things, we can do it. And the time is now. The time is definitely now. And I think that because of the events happening around us, from the murder of George Floyd and many other Black men and women, to all the sexual harassment cases that keep coming up, the Me Too movement around the world, and the momentum that it's gained just not in the US, but around the world. I think the time is now. Organizations and individuals who are bystanders are now woke. And I think the time is now to go from this sort of performative action to really sustainable and transformative progress, because we can do it. We've seen evidence of that. So it is different. And I think we need to seize the moment and be aggressive, really sort of unfreeze the way we've done things to make progress.
Which leads perfectly into the last thing I want to ask you. You've done this. You were at Sodexo and been in other places. So what tips do you have? What can we do to create a truly inclusive business environment within a company or across companies?
Yeah, so I love this question because I get to talk about some of the principles in my book, right? So as you mentioned, I have a book coming out in the fall called Leading Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's for all organizations. It's just not for global organizations. But there's no cookie cutter. There's no recipe. There's no checklist that you can use. But I think what's important is to use a framework. And I sort of mentioned 5 principles. So it's what I call the principles really form more like a scaffolding or a guidepost for the work, in changing cultures. So the first one is make it local. And this is about really sort of ensuring that whatever you're doing is basically contextualized to both the geography as well as to the organizational context, because you can't just plug and play. That doesn't work that way. So you have to contextualize it to the organization, to the geography, while pushing for change. The second principle is leaders change to lead change. And we know that this work has to be driven from the top, just as it is for any other business initiative. It has to be driven from the top. But in order to do that, leaders have to internalize the importance of DEI. And I think I mentioned that with the events happening, you have organizations and leaders who are now woke, right? So you have leaders who are internalizing the importance of DEI to themselves and to their organizations. And to do that, they have to shift their worldview. It takes a certain amount of disruption if they're going to lead with purpose and with passion, right? So I think that's the second principle. Leaders change to lead change. The third principle is, and it's good business too. Now, for any change initiative, you have to have a change narrative, because absent that change narrative, you cannot really make the change stick. So whether the change narrative is about financial impact and business case, whether it's about the legal reasons for doing it, or whether it's about social justice, you have to have a clear change narrative for why you're doing this work. And it has to be linked to the business model and to the mission of the organization. The fourth is go deep, wide, and inside out. So this is about seeding the organization at all levels with change agents. It's about impacting systems and structures. So when you think about advancing women, it's about ensuring that you take a gender lens to your entire pipeline, right from recruiting to succession planning to development to are you sponsoring women? Do you have mentors? Are you ensuring career paths for women that take them into profit and loss positions? Because that really is the pathway to senior level positions. Are you building that pipeline? So I think that's absolutely critical. So go deep, wide, and inside out. The inside out piece is really the external ecosystem that is important. And the last piece is know what matters and count it. So really put some clear metrics in place, which is what WBC is doing, and hold teams accountable. Whether it's financially or in any other way, hold teams accountable. So it's those 5 principles that can lead to culture change, that can really help to advance women if we sort of, follow these 5 principles. So let me just stop there.
Those are fantastic. And I'm just thinking, as we apply them, as you said, to the WBC, to our accountability with our organizations, our targets, and as we're moving together collectively. Rohini, thank you. It has been a pleasure, and I know we will come and we will hear more at the summit on this topic and more about what we're doing to accelerate progress, how we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for your time today. For the
Thanks,
audience,
Gwen.
thank you. And please, everyone, please register for our summit. You can find all the information on the WBC website, wbccollaborative.org, under our events tab. We are putting the link in the chat. We cannot wait to see you there, and join us. Join this fastest growing business movement. We'd like to thank everyone who joined us for our first LinkedIn Live. Our next show is next week on August 26th, where we'll be talking about women in the C-suite. Invite your followers and friends to join us. And additionally, one more last time, remember to register for the summit and keep up to date in the progress of the movement by following us on social media at WBC Collaborative on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Anand, Rohini. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks, Gwen. Thank you, everyone.